We talk about cutting down roughing power, and when we talk about cutting down roughing power, we're talking about leading trump. And now sometimes there are different reasons to lead trump, but there are reasons. One of those reasons can be like what we were just talking about with passive leads. Sometimes you just don't want to give anything away. You don't want to lead away from a king or queen or whatever. You want to make a safe lead. And a lot of times, when the opponents are in a contract or in a suit contract, a trump lead is a safe lead. And even if partner has an honor, like what if you have three? The opponents are in 4 spades. You're like, okay, I want to be passive. I lead a little spade from 3 small, and you finesse partner's king. Well, you know what? If DeClaire was missing the queen of trump and had ace queen, they were always going to take the finesse anyhow, right? So you didn't give anything away that they weren't entitled to, most likely. So while it may look on the surface like you have given up a trick, you haven't given them anything that they're not already entitled to. So that is one way sometimes we lead trump there, and in that case you're doing it because you're being passive. But the most compelling reason to lead trump is probably because you want to cut down roughing power. I always like to start my story, discussion of leading trump with a story from a tournament. Several years ago, I was playing it. They had it not too long ago. They usually do it in September, I think. Cheyenne has a sectional tournament. Not as big as tournaments in Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, but a decent little sectional. And I was playing with a good friend of mine here, and this story truly is better if you know my friend and bridge partner that I was playing with. But the opponents had an auction. My partner ended up on opening lead. Now she's very deliberate on her opening lead, but she knows what to do. She just wants to go through it, cycle back through the auction in her head, make sure she's doing the right thing before she tables the card. I knew from the opponent's auction that she was going to lead a trump. I had complete faith. So she thought for a minute and sure enough, tabled a trump. And the lady who put down the dummy thought this was very funny, and she giggled and she said, when in doubt, lead trump. And my friend peered over her glasses and said, I wasn't in doubt. And not only did I enjoy that moment, but I have used it to make a point about leading trump that I think is really important. And that is, if you believe, that because that's one of those old sayings, it's one of those old bridge mantras that is terrible advice. Don't ever lead trump because you're in doubt. Don't lead trump because you don't know what to lead and you can't think of anything better to do. Lead trump because you know it's the right lead. Lead trump with purpose is what we're getting at. And sometimes you end up in a situation where the auction, and again, hopefully you'll get to the point where you start to recognize these auctions, where the bidding screams for a trump lead. And here you are on lead, and that's your trump holding. Now, you don't want to lead a trump, do you? You don't want to lead away from your queen because you're thinking, they're going to take a finesse in the trump suit, and I'm going to score my queen, and if I lead away from it, I'm going to lose it. But if the auction calls for a trump lead, no matter how much it hurts, you should lead a trump. And the idea here is that what you give up in leading away from this honor, you get back double in tricks other places. What you're doing when you're leading trump is, and if you have a hand, because you're going to find some hands that are going to be played as a complete cross rough, where DeClaire is never going to draw trump. They're just going to go rough, 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 and by the time they get to the 3rd and 4th rounds of roughing, they're now roughing with their honors, and you can't even over rough, right? And sometimes that is, the best path or the only path to the tricks that they need to take. And your counter to this is to lead trump, because and especially in situations where like they're in a 4-4 fit, right? Let's say they have equal number of trumps, both in their hand and the dummy. Well, each trump in the dummy and each trump in their hand, if they have shortness in different places, those can be scored separately, right? It's a trick for dummy and a trick in hand, and a trick for dummy and a trick in hand. Every time you lead trump, you take one of those away, right? You've turned 2 tricks into 1. You're doing exactly, as a defender, you're doing exactly what declare does to you when declare draws trump because they want to run their side suit. They're drawing trump so that you don't get a ruff and your partner doesn't get a ruff. You don't get to score your trumps separately. You're doing the same thing, same concept. You're just doing it as a defender rather than as a declare. So you're trying to cut down ruffing power. And sometimes you're preventing ruffs in both hands, but mainly what you're doing most of the time is you're taking away specifically dummies' ruffing power. And if you remember our discussion about how, like when we have a situation where we talk about the long hand versus the short hand with your trumps, like I open a spade and I have 5 trumps and partner has raised spades and they've supported with 3. And how, often declare's plan is, okay, if possible, use little trumps to rough things in dummy, use the long trumps in my hand to finish drawing trump. So in those situations, you're not necessarily trying to prevent declare from roughing something in hand, but you may want to cut down dummy's roughing power. So, what do we look for? How do we know we should lead trump? So sometimes the opponents end up in what appears to be a reluctant contract. We'll look at a hand here in a moment. For an auction just like this. I open a spade, you respond to no trump, presumably forcing no trump, since that's what we do, right? 1 no, or 1 spade, 1 no forcing, 2 diamonds, pass. Well, what do we think? What do we know about the dummy here? What can we expect to see in the dummy?
Not much shortness in spades.
A fairly weak hand, right? A hand that was good enough for 1 bid, but obviously less than invitational, right? Because they didn't bid again. So dummy probably only has like 6 to 9 points, right? With 10 or more, they'd probably be bidding once more at least. They may be invited. All right, so dummy's known to be weak.
2 or fewer spades.
2 or fewer, yeah, and in fact, very often a singleton spade. Because don't we often take a preference on a doubleton on this auction and just go ahead and play a 5-2 fit? Now, if diamonds are way better than spades, we may not do that. If opener comes back 2 diamonds and maybe you had a doubleton spade and you were going to preference the spades, but all of a sudden partner hit your 5-card suit. All right, now you're like, diamonds this is a big enough fit that I'd rather be in our probable 9-card fit than our 7-card fit. So yeah, dummy might have a doubleton spade, but certainly not 3 or more, right? Because you would surely have raised your partner's spades. And a lot of times there might be a singleton. Well, if the dummy is going to show up with a singleton spade, unless declare has all the top spades, they're probably going to want to rough some and try and set up the spades in their hand, right? They may need to rough spade losers. Well, you want to take that ability away. So this is what when we talk about a preference taken, and I should add this time, a preference with a weak hand. So if this person actually raises diamonds next, maybe the trump lead doesn't stand out quite as much. It may be fine, but if they raise the 3 diamonds, now they probably have an invitational hand with good diamond support, right? So a trump may still be right in that situation, but leading it may not be as critical. Because if dummy shows up, I mean, look, and I've had this happen. I've seen preference auctions like this, and I led a trump, and the dummy tabled something like 5 diamonds to the king. I'll say, oh, hey, I'm glad I prevented you from roughing anything in dummy. All right, well, you tried. And so kind of along the same lines, when there's a weak preference taken, now we don't know on this auction, we think that the dummy is probably short in spades. We don't know that for sure, but we suspect that dummy is short in spades. But sometimes we'll have an auction where shortness is actually explicitly shown or implied as somebody patterned out their hand during the auction. So if we think that shortness is going to show up in dummy, and then maybe as part of that, if it looked like the opponents were trying to get to a 3-no game, but they didn't bid it, it's maybe sort of a reluctant contract, right? It's maybe like, well, we don't love this, but we don't think we belong in 3-no. Either because they don't quite have the values, or they don't have a suit stopped. Sometimes your opponents will be playing a convention that will specifically show shortness. Has anybody ever come across mini Roman before? So I used to play it years ago. It was fun for a while. It seemed like it was a more novel thing to do, and it lost its luster. I would play it. It's okay. It's useful sometimes, but I find that it doesn't work all that well against good competition because they know how to defend it. So Mini Roman is a gadget where your 2 diamond opening, instead of playing it as just a regular old weak 2 diamonds, it's played as a hand. It's usually a 4x1 hand with unspecified shortness. And then your partner can ask where the shortness is if they're interested in game, or you just have a pass or correct situation where you just find your best fit. One of the problems with playing this convention against good opponents is that they know that trump lead against a mini Roman is almost automatic. Because you know somebody has a singleton. And you know that, especially on a weak situation, so like the way it would work would be, let's say I open 2 diamonds. And I've got this opening, and it's usually like a minimum opening hand. It's usually played like, like 11 to 14 points. It's a limited bid. So let's say I bid 2 diamonds. You know I have 11 to 14, and I have shortness somewhere. But you don't know where the shortness is. So we need to find our best fit. So let's say you just want to sign off. So you bid 2 hearts. You make the cheapest bid you can stand. If I pass 2 hearts, you know that's one of my suits, right? Because you just took a weak preference. What if my singleton is in hearts? I don't want to stay there, right? So now I go up the line and I bid 2 spades. And you decide if you want to play 2 spades. If you can't play spades, you can bid 3 clubs or 3 diamonds because you know I have those, right? So you've had like kind of this revealing auction, right? Where the opponents know that declarer is short somewhere and they know that you're taking a weak preference. Well, whatever auction you've had, I played this for a while and I played it in club games often against weak competition, and they wouldn't lead trump. And I'd end up with all sorts of over tricks on these hands. I was like, yeah, this is great. This is a great convention. And I started playing it against better players, and they led trump every time. So the idea is that sometimes you actually do know about shortness. We talk about shortness in dummy mainly, but it could be shortness in either hand. So again, if somebody's got a singleton, there's a very good chance that your opponents want to be roughing. If they want to be roughing, you want them to not be roughing. And so you lead trumps. Here's this theme again. We looked at an example earlier where we changed a hand from, it was originally an attacking hand, and then we gave you, instead of king jack 4th in an unbid suit, we gave you king jack fourth of one of their suits, and we talked about leading trump there because you might have some winners in that side suit. So yeah, this is the same thing. If you know that their side suit isn't just easily running, and that they may need to try and rough out some missing honors, your counter to that is to lead trump. You may not get all of the tricks in their side suit. They may be able to rough an honor or two out, or and when I say that, I mean even like down to a 10 or a 9 or something like that. That might say that you may not get all of those cards, but you might get more than you would have gotten if you didn't lead trump. So yeah, so if their side suit is splitting badly and or you have, good holding, honors in that side suit, even just a couple honors. And then this one here may surprise you a little bit. You've doubled the opponents for penalty, and the normal and the most common situation is they've sacrificed against you. You wanted to play 4 spades, you knew it was your hand, they wouldn't let you, they outbid you, they bid 5 diamonds because they were at favorable vulnerability, they knew you were going to double them, and they didn't care, they were happy to play 5 diamonds doubled because they think they can get out for down 1 or down 2 instead of down 3 or down 4, right? They think that their penalty will be less than you making your vulnerable game. Very common situation at match points, especially if somebody preempts. One of your opponents preempts and then that preempt gets raised. So these are situations where your side has the balance of power. Your side has significantly more of the high card points than they do. When your side has the balance of power, the only place they have tricks generally is from roughing, right? That's where they get the offense. That's why their sacrifice can be so effective with so few high card points, because they have a huge trump fit and they can rough. They don't need a lot of high card points. Now, the unfortunate situation about this is that you don't have that many trumps you can lead. But even if you have a couple, you should generally be leading them. It's a good idea to follow, and I know I've worked with several students that I've played with before. We've had situations where, they recognized that our opponents were sacrificing. They knew that my double was for penalty, and they sat for the double. But then they didn't follow up by leading trump at every opportunity. And yeah, again, you don't always have control over this. If they're in a 10 card fit and your side only has 3 trumps, you can only do it a couple of times. And even at that, what if the person who started with 1 trump ends up on lead and their trump is already gone and they can't continue? But you want to cut down as much roughing power as possible in these situations. Because if you do, you'll end up scoring some of your high cards. If you can prevent a few of your honors from getting roughed, you can usually get, squeeze another trick or 2 out of it. And this isn't just for sacrifices. Anytime the opponents are penalized, even if we get a situation where they end up being penalized in a part score, like a double gets converted or something like that. We looked at that a little bit. You remember when we were talking about a few weeks back about the penalty pass, about where your partner opened the bidding and they and they overcalled, and you had a big stack of their suit, and you passed hoping partner would reopen with a double, so that you got to defend a double part score. And we mentioned at some point looking at that hand diagram. Okay, so on opening lead, you didn't really want to lead trump because you had king jack 10 and you knew that the ace queen were on your right. So you led partner suit, but then as soon as partner got in, they led their trump through. And then we started pushing the trumps. That's exactly what's going on. You know, when they don't have the high card points, they're gonna try and score tricks from ruffing. By the way, everything on these lists, all of these conditions, they are right out of the book. So,